Hello everyone, welcome back to online NPTEL course on research methodology for planning and architectural studies. Today we'll discuss very important topic, and that is called research process. The entire course will discuss in detail various component of this process only. So let us understand in a very broad manner and also some of the component of the research process. So this research process component will be discussing in three consecutive lectures. So today we will start with lecture number 6, research process part 1. So in this particular lecture, what we aim to learn that what is research process, then defining the research problem, then how to select a research problem and what are the different criteria that we should look into while selecting a research problem. Then also we discuss the component of the research process, that is the review of literature. So this is very important flow chart for all of us, all researcher in concern, that for any particular research that we aim to conduct, we should make a good methodology and we should understand this research process. So what exactly the research process means? It is a systematic and organized series of actions that researchers follow to investigate a specific research question. Whether you are doing research on planning, whether you are doing research on architectural elements, building, or you are doing research in some of the environmental aspect, it does not matter, this process will be more or less same. Only the some of the actions that we will take for planning research or maybe architectural research or research in environmental science will differ. So let us understand it very carefully. So for this particular process, the first step is the defining the research problem. What exactly you are going to address, what you are going to investigate. Next, after that, once you identify the problem, then you should go for literature review. So in this case, review of literature component is, you can say, a backbone of making any research successful, because through this we will try to understand the gap in the literature, what exactly the area where we should do research, where there has not been much studies already available. So review of literature, it may be the review of concept and theories, if we are going to do some kind of theoretical advancement of any existing theory and concept, or it can be the review of previous research findings. So this is something we do, that maybe our research has been done 20 years ago in a particular region and one would like to do similar kind of research in today's time to see the temporal variation over time, what is the change. So in that case we have to also go for some kind of review of those kind of findings, and it is also good sometimes to make a comparison in your discussion section of your paper, that okay, I have found this particular thing, my finding says this particular phenomena, whether like this is already being established or this is contrary to the existing finding, and then so on you can have a engaging discussion for your paper. Once the review of literature is done, then you are very clear about the gap in the research, and that will help you to form the research questions and hypothesis. So this is stage number 3. So in stage number 2 we go for the review of literature. Now moving forward, once you are very clear that these are the research questions, and then through your objective you will identify and you will try to you will identify the exact phenomena, or you will do other steps, you will follow other steps like data collection, data analysis, and finally try to address that particular objective and try to prove or disprove the hypothesis. Now moving forward, after this you have the design in the research stage. So in this case your objective is clear, your research question is clear, even your hypothesis, if your research will have hypothesis, that stage is clear. Next, you have to design your research considering that what type of data you require, if it is some sort of sampling required, so what kind of sampling strategy you should adopt, what should be the minimum sample size, etc. Once you design it, okay, so in this particular stage, like if it is a questionnaire based survey, so then you design the questionnaire and based on that you go for a data collection. So this data collection, it may be primary data, it may be secondary data, that we will discuss in detail. And then once we collect the data, then next stage is your stage number 6 is the analysis of the data. Now once you analyze the data, you will get certain findings. Now this is just the findings, then you have to interpret that particular data and finally you have to report it. So this is very important for all of us to follow this particular process. So as I already mentioned, this is a very broad process, and if you try to frame your overall action plan of your research, so then also you can say that some of the stages can be elaborated further. You may have a series of literature review, you may have different type of objective formulation, some of them will have certain hypothesis to prove, somewhere it is some kind of concept, so then you will make it. So for today's lecture, that is the part 1 of research process, will be mainly focusing on the first two stage, the stage 1 and stage 2 of this process flow diagram, that is defining the research problem and the review of literature. Now the first stage, defining the research problem. In this stage, this is the first and foremost stage of any research, so it should be taken into consideration very seriously, and you have to give emphasis on that, how to define the research problem. So what is research problem? So it is basically a specific issue or concern or gap in the existing knowledge that researcher aims to address through systematic investigation and analysis. So there are keywords that we need to identify. So specific issue, so if we are doing something like a planning or architectural research, so in this case there might be some issues, say for example, now if you want to do some kind of building design in certain harsh climate, or maybe it is very cold climate or it is very hot climate, so depending on that, the material that you are going to use for the external wall, so there are certain kind of decision you have to make. So whatever the existing material that you have, probably that is not cost efficient, and you need something to be procured or designed which will be cost effective, at the same time performance wise it will be all right to deal with that particular extreme weather situation. So this is some sort of issue that you need to solve. So there is some problem you need to solve. There might be a concern that, okay, so say for example, in a city nowadays there are so many vehicles on the road and there are typical issue of your parking management. You cannot have that much of area to facilitate so many parkings. So that is a problem, that is a concern, how to manage it. Or it may be a gap that, okay, based on the literature or based on the current available solutions, so you are not getting anything to solve the problem, whatever, like if you even say that parking related issues, the existing strategies, they are not working. So for that there is a gap, so we have to investigate more to find it out that what should be the right solution. Now once you have those kind of issues, concern and the gap in knowledge, researcher will pick up that particular problem and try to solve it through this entire process. So in this case there should be a systematic investigation starting from understanding the problem, reviewing of the past data, and then if required will get new data from the field, from primary or secondary sources, then you analyze and then come up with certain strategy and try to say, okay, this can be done to solve the current issue or the concern. So in this case there are few features that we need to understand, that why we should make this research problem very much crisp and to the point. So, there is a purpose, as because this sets the direction of entire research, or why you are doing the purpose of the research, or also it will define the scope of study, and this will guide you to formulate your research questions. Unless you understand the problem, you cannot ask, or you cannot formulate the question. Say for example, like if you have a problem of traffic congestion on a road. So, first of all we have to understand why this congestion there on the side. It may be due to poor design of the road, it may be too many vehicles on the road, or maybe it is something, there is a mix between your you know a motorized vehicle and also the non motorized movement, or maybe there is some other issues. So, you just try to identify that particular thing, and then you try to frame the research questions, that okay, whether removing this non motorized movement from that road will solve the congestion. So, this is a question. So, you need to try understand that part and you need to solve it, or else you say that creating another kind of bypass road, or making a foot over bridge for the pedestrian, or making a flyover for diverting the traffic will reduce the congestion. So, all such kind of questions will come, and we have to assess it through data collection, through analysis. Also in this case, the clarity and specificity is very important part, as because in this stage from a broad general topic you pinpoint to a specific research problem, very clear. Because as I already mentioned, as a researcher many a time we are very much optimistic and we try to solve so many things, and we aspire to solve everything. Say if something is related to the vehicle that is contributing to some emission, and then also the overall climate, or you can say that overall environment for a city. So, maybe in that case there are so many directions that we can take up that particular problem, whether we take it to the impact on health, impact on the time management, impact on the overall development, impact on the GDP. So, there are so many things around it. So, if you want to tackle everything together, so within the time frame that you want to do, probably it will be too much challenging. So, in this stage definitely the problem or the research question should be very confined, very specific. Then the next feature is the relevance and the significance. So, it should contribute to the existing body of knowledge. So, the research problem that you picked up, it should not be just for the sake of doing something as activity, academic activity. So, there should be some sort of relevance. So, if you identify the research gap from the literature, so your end of your research, it will add on to that gap. So, next time any other researcher will actually identify your research as a contribution and then take it forward for further gap and all. So, we have to fill up that gap in literature, and also it can give a solution not only to the existing body of literature knowledge enhancement, but also it can come up with a practical solution which will be essential for such kind of research. Next is the feasibility. In this case also the research problem, if you define it very properly, it can manage the researcher resources. So, what are the resources? That we have a time constraint, we have some sort of ethical consideration to be made if it is a like some sort of data analysis or data collection that we are going to do where ethical approval is required. Then availability of the data. So, we should be aware of that, okay, for my research probably I have those kind of data sources, or else even if I have to go for a primary data. So, okay, this is doable, and also in this case the practicality of conducting the study. So, in all such cases it should be something like your research problem formulation will give all this direction. So, it is not all of a sudden we start something start doing something and then we get into trouble that we do not have time, we do not have data access. So, then probably we will be in a dangerous situation. So, this is something also very important at this stage. Then alignment with the research objectives. So, obviously from research problem we formulate the research questions, and then accordingly the objectives will be framed. So, this is very much interlinked. Now, if you continue with the same, so framing the title, it is very important that research problem will give you some sort of direction what should be the title of that particular study or the research. Then in this case the formulation should be something, the research problem, where it should be clear and concise statement of the questions. So, research question should be very clear, doable, possible, option. It should not be something that even that cannot be answered within the limited timeline or within the limited resources that you have. Then originality. So, it should represent a novel contribution. So, if I am trying to do something on solving the transportation issue or the congestion on road, it is not new. 10-20 years ago also people were struggling with this, they have also published paper. So, yes, you are right, even if that problem is something that is not new. So, the area of research maybe that is very common, but within that whatever you are going to pick up as your research questions or the angle, the way you want to solve it. So, there should be some novelty. It should not be a similar prototype thing that okay, it is just a signal design problem. So, there are handbooks, you can look into it, you can count the vehicle, and then accordingly you just decide some sort of parameters about the green time, or maybe you can come up with certain established indicator like vehicle to capacity, volume to capacity ratio or V by C ratio. So, that is not essentially the research, but in that try to solve the problem by framing good questions where you have certain kind of novel thoughts in it is required. In this case, evaluate the potential contribution. So, through research problem should evaluate the potential contribution of the existing body of knowledge. So, this is adding to the knowledge base. And then in this case, typically if you say that what are the questions that you frame, that how suppose something is happening. So, how it is happening, why it is happening, when it is happening, who is responsible, what is the reason, and then where it is happening. So, like that there will be some kind of WH questions that keep on asking, you ask yourself, and then accordingly you frame the research questions. So, there is a statement that I also totally agree with, a problem clearly stated is a problem half solved. So, the moment you have a very clear cut problem identification, so 50% of your problem is solved, because that is the area where probably many a times we are not much clear, and then we go for some hit and trial to frame it. So, that is nothing but taking time, and also it may create confusion among the researcher. Okay, now the question is how to select research problem. So, there are certain generalized step that you identify a general area of interest. So, first you just make your mind that okay, I am going to do something related to the impact of the congestion on the people's mental health, or maybe in people's well-being. So, in such kind of cases, like this is a very broad, and you can say that at this moment is look like a very vague idea, and then slowly you have to get into the detail part of it. So, for that what you need to do, you need to review the existing literature, that with this idea that okay, is there any relation on this particular traffic congestion and then its impact on the people's mental health or well-being. Okay, whether like the assumption is if people stuck into congestion, their productivity goes down and they are getting frustrated the moment they reach to their offices, school. So, as because they were stuck in that jam, so there is some kind of impact, negative impact on their well-being. So, this is some idea, but we need to read more through literature. So, in this case it may be conceptual or theoretical, as I already mentioned. It may be some kind of empirical literature of similar study where there are certain findings. Okay, this is not impacting the kids, this is impacting the elder generation or maybe the old age population. So, such kind of findings, if it is there, so go through it. Then you have to also go through the other documents and other facts and findings. Now, once it is done, then you identify the gaps and unanswered question. So, this is something from your broad idea, you have certain thing to evaluate what is already being done, and now you just need to find out the gap. To identify the gaps in the knowledge base and then also determine the areas that need further investigation. So, that is something, okay, people have talked about this part, but probably in this particular aspect things are not explored much. So, let us think on that. Now, after that you may have different ideas to solve it, different approach to solve it. Then consider the practical relevance, that what you are saying or what you are thinking, that okay, this could be a solution or this may be a solution, then you have to see whether it is practical, will be that relevant to that particular problem. So, you consider all the issues and challenges in the real world implication of your idea. So, that does not mean that I am suggesting that you confine yourself only to whatever is implementable and you do not explore new things, but at the same time whatever you are aiming at. So, what could be the possible challenges if you want to implement it, that you look into it. Otherwise, many a times we start with some idea, okay, and practically it is not possible in some cases where it is basically to tackle a practical problem, then maybe we are wasting our time, and after certain time when we just little advanced in our research and then find that this is something it is not possible. So, we get frustrated, and that should not be the case if we can make this check at this level. Then brainstorm and generate ideas. So, in this case you just try to explore more, you explore more, you explore with your friends, with your supervisor, with your guide, and also try to make yourself confident enough that okay, whatever you are thinking, that is making some sense to take up as a research problem. Then after that you narrow down the scope, as already I have mentioned, and I am keep on telling you that suppose I aim to do some research and I want to contribute in certain sustainable development goals. Say for example, the goal number 6, which is talking about the clean water and sanitation. So, there are many aspects. So, in this case if I just say that I want to do everything that will address the SDG 6, probably it is not possible within the time frame. Yes, maybe if I can spend my entire life doing research on this water and sanitation related thing, so probably I can take up many aspect of it, but in a particular time frame that should be something narrow down and focused. So, in that case also it should not be a very short and very narrow thing that I just collect some data and showcase the data. So, that needs certain kind of deliberation, and we should make the boundary and limitation of the research problem. Then after that you just create the road map, that okay, once it is there, so what are the other things we need to do, what data to be collected, what are the different resources that is required, what method you can think of. So, that also can come from the literature review. So, we will discuss in detail the literature review portion in our upcoming lectures, where the purpose of literature review we will discuss in detail. Then the relationship that we assume, so that can be also captured. Then the entire research methodology of the study. Coming to the review of literature, that is the next part after you having the problem identified, and then in this case what exactly you need to do. So you have to rely on something called abstracting and indexing journal, because with those kind of index journal, SCI, Scopus, or maybe other databases, established databases, if you rely on those journals, their findings, it will have much more scientific acceptance. Also maybe published, unpublished bibliographies that you can refer to. Government report is also taken as a valuable source of data. Reports by consulting group, sometimes private organization, they are publishing some of the reports. Conference proceedings, books chapter, patents, for especially for the new area, new development, prototype designing and all. So all such cases you also need to go through the patent, so that can also give you some unique idea what has been done, and then where is the gap you can identify, and other relevant and credible documents that you can capture. Now in this particular case, how literature review will help you out? It will help to recognize the patterns or the trend in literature and how the field has evolved over time. Say for example, now we are doing a research here on the something called cultural tourism. Say for example, tourism is a very old, very well defined terminology, and there are established papers, there are very good journals that you can refer to see all this kind of thing. But now slowly there are certain kind of division in the tourism research, that okay, there is something on the heritage tourism, somewhere it is the ecotourism, whether something is now all the health tourism, like that. Another part is your cultural tourism. Now under cultural tourism there is a new terminology which is not very common, that is the creative tourism. Now in such cases, if we want to do something on it, first we have to understand that how it is different, how it is unique compared to other tourism, and what is actually the market of that particular tourism where we are aiming to investigate. Or in all such cases, tourism development is a cost intensive aspect. So the government would like to know that through this particular development, whether the government will get certain revenue or it is not. So in all this aspect, probably we have to see the trend. Now if we find that okay, it is a new thing in the market and people are now investigating on this, so okay, you can make a call. If you find that okay, this is already being exhausted, so things are established, there is no further research going on, after certain time the research on that area is stopped. So we have to find out the reason why it is. Is it that new area is not required, it is already working fine, or like that you can find out the reason. After that you identify the gap in literature where further research is required, and underlies the unanswered question that is very much pertinent to frame your questions. In this case, another aspect is that this would facilitate the researcher at each and every stage to address the research problem in evaluating method used, or also compare your findings with the past literature. So it is not only to identify the gap in the research, but also the literature review help you to identify the right method for your data analysis. It will also help you proper data type that you should take for your research. It will also help in comparing their findings with your findings. So it is not that literature review part is the second part and then we just complete it in the first semester or second semester, then we do not need to do it. So each and every time you are writing something, so it is required. Maybe to identify the gap you have to do it first, but for selecting method, for comparing this result and all, you need to do it, because it is a continuous process. As I already mentioned earlier, that you are working in certain field, you have reviewed say 300 plus papers and started writing your thesis, and after completion of say after spending 2-3 years, then you are writing your thesis. So in that particular stage, maybe whatever 300 you have reviewed is okay, but not good enough, because within that 2-3 years there might be some relevant journals that may help you to frame your some of the argument. So you have to include them. So, there are different ways to do literature review, that it may be a traditional way, narrative way to do the review, or it may be a systematic literature review, or it may be some meta analysis. So, we will discuss in detail in our coming lectures. So, with that, let us summarize what we have discussed in this lecture. So, we understood the research process, that this is something where it will actually direct a researcher from start point to the end point of a research. Then defining research problem is very crucial in terms of making your topic applicable, making very much pinpointed and also achievable. Then also in this case I have mentioned about how to go about the research problem, how to define it, then the discussion on the literature review and how it can help a researcher in different stages of his or her journey. So, with that, now in our upcoming lectures we will discuss another few steps of the research process. So, hope this lecture will give you some sort of better input in your progress, and we will be meeting with our research process part 2 in our next lecture. Till then, thank you.